The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Oh man, am I glad to see you people. How you doing? It's Wednesday night, July 16th, 2025. I am Jim Peters from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters Tonight. That's Minneapolis behind me there. Actually, we have a window that looks out onto the city, but that's not the view. That's from the other direction. But it'll work. Oh, this is episode number 252 if you're tuning in, and you got to mark your bingo cards. Last night, if you watched our show, Spencer Morrison, this is becoming an increasing thing, and I don't know what to make of it, because the fact of the matter is it's amazing this technology works anything at all. We had a hard time getting Spencer on, and so I decided not to delay the show. I will delay the start of the show for 1 or 2 minutes to accommodate a guest, and I thought, well, screw it. Around 2 minutes after 8, I pushed the button, and the whole thing started. And then when the intro got done running, all of a sudden, very suddenly, there's Spencer. So we didn't even have an intro, nothing. We didn't bother with any sort of introductions or anything. We just went right to it because it was working. It's amazing. Now tonight we're talking to Shaz Khan, and she calls us from Geneva, Switzerland. This is audio only, unfortunately. You get to watch me, of course. But so we're doing on telephone. And I'm really amazed. No delay at all. It's like it was really incredible. Now we've done video from England several times, no problem. And the reason we did phone for this wasn't technical issues. She was just in transit and could not do video, and we even talked about that at the end of the interview. So we taped this afternoon. It's fascinating, really. You have to hear this. And the cool thing about this is, and this was true of Spencer Morrison last night too. Morrison is a lawyer by trade, and he wrote a book about economics. Shaz Khan, believe it or not, is a interior designer. She's a designer by trade, and she wrote a book about vaccines. And I think this is kind of a good thing because all of a sudden, well, you're not an expert, you don't have a degree. Oh, bullshit! It's like information's everywhere, and some people are smarter than others, frankly, or actually more driven, and that's actually really what it is. People they're obsessed. And she even admits it. She became obsessed with vaccines, and so she spent 10 years of her life studying to write this book. So she knows pretty much everything there is to know about everything. That was pretty much obvious talking to her too. So, and last night we're talking to Spencer Morrison, and he basically ended up contradicting a lot of stuff that a lot of traditional economists think. And I've told him at the time, and I do believe this, I'm starting to think more and more that a lot of these people are so-called experts don't know shit. That's a pretty good way to put it. So I actually think it's a good thing we have people doing this. Because people, if you're not an expert, you're not in the weeds. And also, like Shaz pointed out toward the end of the interview here, you're also not beholden to anybody in the profession. That's one thing about, we talk about UFOs on the show a lot, and I know a lot about it. I know as much as pretty much any expert on the planet. And yet I do not go to any UFO conventions. I have nothing to do with the quote-unquote UFO community, and that's deliberate. I do not want to be influenced by these people. They have their political machinations. A lot of these people are trying and actually do make a lot of money off of this. That's not my goal. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. I'm hoping someday we'll make a little money at this show, but this show is not just about UFOs. It's also not just about politics, if you've noticed. And we started out that way. This started out as a political program. And at some point, both I came to the conclusion, and I had a couple friends telling me, and then my wife's telling me, They don't like the fact I'm talking about conservative politics. Well, that's because I live in one of the three most liberal districts in the United States, congressional districts. But the other thing is that I noticed, first of all, two things. Um, there's the media, and especially new media, is flooded with shows about politics, mostly conservative politics, but there's liberal politics too. You go to Rumble, I mean, hundreds of them, and most of them are on 3 to 5 days a week. You know, and so I thought, well, there's a lot of competition. Maybe try something different. And the second thing is, I came to the conclusion I'm really not that good at political commentary. I'm okay. I'm all right. I get by. I can do it. But why do something? What am I good at? I'm good at talking to people. That's what I'm good at. And they talk to me. And honest to God, sometimes I don't know why. I mean, I don't know if you watch the show. This is the 252nd episode. People spill their guts to me, it's like I don't really understand. We were preparing some publicity stuff for the show, and we put in the thing about the fact that my wife is totally tired of the fact we'll go into a restaurant, and for some inexplicable reason, the waitress will sit down on our booth and start telling me her life story. I didn't ask her, she doesn't know I do this, but she will. And this happens over and over again. So I thought, okay, let's change it. And then I had a guy on the radio. We almost syndicated the show to national radio in November last year. Almost. We worked on it for months. It finally fell through. But one of the CEO of the radio company said, you're the modern day Larry King. You should talk to everybody. Screw just politics. We have our political guests on the show. We do about 20% of them are still political. But we try to talk to everybody about everything. And so Shaz Khan is one of those people. Spencer Morrison, great conversation with him last night. If you didn't get a chance to watch that show, we had a really good time. I'm going to have him back. There's never been a single person that we've had on the show has refused to come back on. So, and then even going back to the Conch News days. I mean, we've got 252 of these, about 600 of them at Conch News. They were all audio only, but they were both live radio and podcasts too. So anyway, what I'm talking. Okay, so I'm going to give you our schedule. Shaz Khan tonight. Tomorrow night, Keith Gross. He is the former Assistant State Attorney General for the state of Florida, and he's written a book called Dirt Roads to Runways, Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation. That's his book. He's not, I think he was running for office, but he's not anymore, if I'm right. He dropped out or got primaried or something like that. But he's still, out selling his book. God bless him. That's cool. Now, we don't do live shows here. With this show, if you look at the banners on YouTube and Rundle, we do Monday through Thursday. However, now we're running on Friday nights. We run a rerun. I'm like Carson, now. And if you're under 40, you probably don't know who Johnny Carson is. I was really proud. My 25-year-old niece, she knew who Carson was. I was pretty impressed. But yeah, we're running. On Friday nights now we run reruns. We also run reruns whenever we can't do a live show, which was like this Monday. We had to drop. We had to take the night off, and we ran a rerun. So now there's in the live slot at 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, you can see a show. 4 nights of the week, usually they're live. Fridays, no, but I don't on the schedule. And we got to update the schedule on the website. It's as of Monday. It's expired now, but we don't put in the reruns or the day or reruns and days off. So, and we don't put in Fridays. We just you just show up. You're going to see something. That's all there's to it. We do put them up ahead of time on the upcoming shows on Rumble, YouTube, and Twitch and all that sort of stuff. So you see them there usually about a day ahead of time, occasionally 2. But yeah. So anyway, so I don't know who the rerun's going to be on Friday. I don't, but we'll have a rerun on Friday. Next Monday, our old friend Don Zorro's here. Lover of women, intelligence operative, very popular. He always gets a really good response. Very, very funny man. We enjoy having him. Tuesday, Nils Gravelis. And Nils is, and I want to make sure I get this right. He's not a Los Angeles investigator, private investigator. He's a detective, and I don't know the difference. But his publicist said he feels very strongly about this. So we will find out what the difference between a private investigator and a detective is. I do not know. But anyway, he's been working in Los Angeles for many years, worked on many high-profile cases. I lived there for a while. I'm fascinated with the place, and this is really. I don't know what to make of this. I'm really fascinated by Los Angeles, even though I don't necessarily really like it. I didn't really can't say I enjoyed living there. I didn't not enjoy it either, but it was kind of neutral. But I'm fascinated by the place nonetheless. I mean, there's enormous amount of money. There's enormous amount of arrogance, egotism. There's enormous amount of everything. And then if you know anything about the history of Los Angeles, that's even more amazing because I have my favorite picture of the city, which I'm going to put up in my office someday, but I have to arrange to get a copy of it. Is from 1920. I have a photo in a large coffee table book, Los Angeles 1920. It's the corner of Wilshire and San Vicente Boulevards in 1920. In that corner, what's in that picture is two dirt roads and a tree. That's it. Nothing else. It's just fields and a tree and two dirt roads that cross each other. Now, if you go to that intersection, there's 40-story buildings there, and that was only 100 years ago. It's astonishing how quickly that city built up. Also, my favorite movie, probably all time, is probably Chinatown too, which is about the evolution of the city of Los Angeles. So, anyway, so he's joining us on next Tuesday. On Wednesday, Francis Menton. Now, this is another guy too. This is a guy, he writes a blog on economics, even though he's not a trained economist. He's a retired lawyer. He ran a law firm in Manhattan, and his blog is called the Manhattan Contrarian. He still lives in Manhattan, and he writes from there. And so we're going to talk to him too. That should be kind of fascinating. Thursday, Thomas DiLorenzo, and he's the president of the Mises Institute. And if you've watched this show in the past, one of our regular guests is economist Murray Sabrin, and he's very involved in the Mises Institute. That's considered Ludwig von Mises was a Viennese economist, and he started what's generally called the Austrian School of Economics. So it's very laissez-faire. I mean, they're really for free markets and all that sort of stuff. God bless them. I this we can talk about this in part two, but after we do the interview. And by the way, we're taking. Let me just finish here too. Okay, that's next Thursday. That's a week from tomorrow. That's on Thursday the 24th. Monday the 28th. The at night panel returns once a month. We're having the panel back. That will be Larry Newman, Tim Conaway, and Don Zorro, who's coming on the Monday before. And we basically four old guys shooting the shit for an hour. That's basically what it is, and we enjoy ourselves. And I assume because the viewership for these shows have been relatively high, you like it too. And we keep the phone lines open. You want to call and talk to us, that's fine, and people do. So please do. And I'm just plugging this right now. Thursday, July 31st, which I think is 2 weeks from tomorrow, is going to be our 2-year anniversary here. And I'm already planning to get some special people to come on. Looking forward to that. That should be fun. What I was going to say earlier is we're taking your calls tonight. And now the interview's pre-taped, so we're not going to take them until part two till the interview's done. But you can call us, and tickers on the bottom of the screen. 325-CALL-JIM, 325-225-5546. You can also send us a text message at 408-458-5088. Those numbers work 24/7. If we're not broadcasting live and you call the call-in number, you have 2 minutes to leave a message, and please do. And you can send us a text message at any time. We'll always get them. So that's what we got going on here. Yeah. Like I like to say, okay, Boomer, we got it going on. We got it going on. We do. Yeah. So let's hear from Shaz Khan here, and then when we come back after the interview, we'll take your phone calls. Okay? Sounds good? Sounds like a plan? I think so. Joining us by phone from Geneva, Switzerland, Shaz Khan, and she's the author of, oh God, I'm not going to screw up the name of your book, am I, Shaz? It is hold on. What is it? What you tell me what it is?
It's called The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline: A Fat-Packed History of Vaccines and Their Makers.
Yeah, I knew that. All right, Shaz, I have to ask you, first of all, you're not a medical professional. Why did you decide to write this book?
So that is correct. I'm not a medical professional or a scientist. I decided to write this book as a result of the research I came across when I dived into vaccines as a result of my father passing away 2 months after his flu vaccine. So that just got me asking questions, and I started researching. And as I dived into libraries, into the National Archives, and I realized how much information was withheld from the public, I thought it was absolutely important that it be released in a public forum. And as I'm a designer, I could do the layout and the design and everything myself. So
Forgive me for asking, but how old was your father?
he was 70.
And was he
wasn't
ill?
that old.
Was he ill at the time?
Well, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, but when he was admitted to hospital, and this was a very late diagnosis, so he was relatively healthy before then. He just had a persistent cough. He's not a smoker, but he was in hospital with neurological symptoms, which is just what I found very strange initially. And then when I found out he received the flu vaccine, and I looked into the package insert, the flu vaccine, I was quite horrified to find out that neurological injuries are known after flu vaccine.
All right, so this is the reason I wanted to have you on, the reason this interests me is I used to work for a conservative news outlet, and we had this was during COVID, and we had one of our reporters had a man on, I cannot remember his name, but he was fairly well known in the vaccine community, and turned out to be the last interview he did before he died from a car accident. And we were talking at the time about the fact that people were finding these really unusual, for lack of a better term, strings or something inside of people's people who've been vaccinated inside their veins. It was really ugly and awful, and no one was reporting on this, and we reported on it. We were basically kind of ignored, and okay. Enough about me. Why? What did you find out when you started looking into this?
Well, I was quite horrified to find out, because to be clear, I came from a position of neutrality. Like, I wasn't against vaccines. I'm not a parent, so I wasn't faced with that decision for my children.
Right.
It wasn't on the radar for me because here in Switzerland they don't push vaccines as much. So when I started looking into the history, I was really shocked to find out how long we have known, or the government has known, about specifically neurological injury after vaccines, and how already in the late 1800s there were doctors who were trying to sound the alarm, and they were being ignored or dismissed or ridiculed as the same playbook we see today.
Is that playbook? Based on profits, or the fact that the government doesn't want people to be hesitant to take vaccines? What do you think's driving this?
I think it's a mix of that. But back in the days, vaccines weren't as profitable as they are now. So I find it hard to believe that the financial motive would have been the only one back in the days when vaccines really weren't making that much money.
Right.
But it still did make the vaccinators some money, because they obviously would get paid per vaccine that they gave. I think at that point, it already became kind of like, we cannot, contradict the scientific consensus, which at the time, you got to remember, this is the late 1800s. The science we had was very crude.
Yeah.
We didn't have any ways of testing, purification of products, or really testing if our idea behind protection is valid. So I don't know. I'd have to say as well, because at that point they already mandated vaccines. It's like the government didn't want to backtrack and admit they'd made a mistake.
Do you think that's true now, though? Because I've been reading through some of the stuff here that your publicist sent me, and also some of the links to some of the stuff, which has been really fascinating. This whole thing's kind of opened my eyes up here. Do you think that one of the reasons, maybe I'm just being congenial here, that the government does not want people not to take vaccines because the danger of not taking them is worse than the possible dangers of taking them? Do you think that's part of it, or a large part anyway?
There's a naive part of me that would like to believe that, but now at this point in time, with what we have on the market today and how the vaccine policy is pushed today, I find myself hard to believe that. Because if they really cared about health, which is ultimately what vaccines are supposed to do, they're supposed to protect your health and and protect you against infection. If that was really the concern, what we saw during COVID would have never happened. So the fact that they pushed this experimental vaccine on pretty much everybody, including pregnant women and children, and they're ignoring the people who are injured, who followed followed the directives and got vaccinated. Now they're being ignored. For me, it can't be, a real concern about health and the fear of, oh my God, if we don't get vaccinated, there's going to be sick people everywhere. When we know that infectious diseases do not affect industrialized, wealthy countries as much as they affect poor countries. And obviously the main difference is the sanitation, the access to healthcare, clean water, nutritious food. So for me, it's not about health anymore.
All right, let me play devil's advocate for just a second here, because I could make the argument, I will make the counter argument that the government basically, especially, let's just say the American government anyway. By the way, are you based in London? Is that where you're based?
No, I was born in London, but I'm based here in Switzerland for the last 25
okay.
years.
All right, very good. I'm just going to use the American government as an example here. I'm sure it's probably different other places. But I have the feeling that the government of the United States basically considers the populace more or less stupid. And so they think that they have to lie about some of this stuff just to get people to basically go along, because otherwise, in other words, I don't think the government of the United States will recognize the fact that the citizenry can recognize any nuance. You know what I mean? Like, for example, if you said about a certain vaccine, and let's say the COVID vaccine, like, okay, this is going to hurt 0.01% of the people who take it. I think they think people will be up in arms and panic. Where on the other hand, that's a relatively reasonable, well, I mean, this is hypothetical, but that's a relatively reasonable, downside to this overall. And I don't know if sometimes I do think that, but I'm kind of naive too. So tell me that I'm wrong.
I don't know if you're wrong, but I don't know if you remember Bill Gates, who was going around and had lots of press interviews in 2020, already early on, and was telling us that we won't get back to normal until we have a vaccine. He already said at that point that he's looking at 10% of potential side effects from the vaccine. So he already knew, and he was talking about 10%, not 0.2.
Yeah.
And the thing that you said about the government taking its citizens being quite stupid, well, I have to admit that I think, again, this is following COVID. I'm not sure I would have said this necessarily before, but the Swiss government also treated us like infants, like not giving us full information,
yes,
not being forthcoming. And now we have this absolute catastrophe of a complete breakdown of public trust in health institutions, which on one hand, you could see the positive outcome of that. But on the other hand, you have people now who don't want to get any kind of treatments because they don't trust anything that comes from the public health authorities.
That's correct.
It's a real problem here in Switzerland as well.
Yeah, it's been terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I totally agree with you. And I don't understand how they thought this wasn't going to happen. That's the other thing that, I mean, here in the United States, we can go through several different subjects about the fact that the government has destroyed their trust. And I don't see why, I think that basically anybody could have projected the fact that if you're going to screw enough people enough time, sooner or later people notice, but that's the part I don't. It seems to me in some ways they cut their own throat. But let's get back to the profit motive here. When did vaccines start becoming extremely profitable? When's that, around the 70s or 80s or?
It was about that time. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint exactly, but there was certain legislation, especially in the US, that were put into place that changed the way that companies could manufacture and profit from vaccines. And one of the main legislative decisions I always come back to is the Bayh-Dole Act, which allowed public funds to be used for private interests. So basically, say that the American taxpayer is paying several $1 million to develop a certain type of vaccine in a university. Well, if that university manages to come up with a successful product, they can then go and patent it and get royalties and charge the public for it, even though it was public money used to develop it. So that was one thing that happened. Then the whole biotech industry with genetic engineering, obviously, that started in the mid-70s, influenced as well how companies could get patents for now no longer natural elements, because you're not allowed to patent a living organism, but you can patent a genetically modified organism. And that changed the landscape as well. And it's worth noting that a lot of the vaccines on the market nowadays do contain some genetically modified elements. So that allows patents to be put into place and to get profits. The big cost that changed was in the 80s, actually, due to lawsuits. the DTP shot, which was diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. I think initially it cost something like 15 cents, and then the companies had to add dollars to it, and it became up to $11 per vaccine because they had to cover their legal costs because they were getting sued right, left, and center for injuries that the people were having after vaccines. So after the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, that changed. That there was no more money risk for the pharmaceutical companies, and they didn't have to worry about lawsuits. So that was another factor that allowed the vaccines to be higher the price.
But are you saying that even though that law came into effect and they no longer had to worry about getting sued, they didn't lower the price? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they didn't. That's interesting. I don't think any company would lower their price that much. It did lower by $2. I think it went down to $8 at one point. But then they started combining the vaccines. So DTP became DTP plus IPV, which is inactivated polio, and hepatitis B, and Hib. And hepatitis B had a patent on it, so they were able to patent the whole product, even though it was just hepatitis B that was patented. So the 5-in-1 that initially came out, and then the 6-in-1, which we have today. I think now, I don't know how much it's charged, but here in Switzerland it's something about 50 to 70 Swiss francs, which is about the same in dollars. So they've been able to charge more. And thankfully for them as well, they have a guaranteed purchase from the US government, from the Swiss government, from many governments worldwide, which means they have guaranteed sales.
Right.
But the prices, they never went back to what it used to be because they didn't have to. And I'm not aware of any maybe laws that limit how much a pharmaceutical manufacturer can make on a profit, but in the US there's no cap for that.
Right.
So basically they can make 1,000% profit if they want to, if they find enough people to still go and buy their product.
Yeah, and of course the thing is, here you have a captive audience of 300 million people, so it's like if you multiply $8 by 100 million times, that's a little bit of money.
Yeah, no, it's substantial. I mean, people often tell me, "Oh, but vaccines can't make money. They don't make much money."
Oh, bullshit!
That's not actually true.
No,
it's not true.
No, even I know that. That's complete crap. It's like no, just like I just said, do the math right now. 100 million times $8. It's like that's a little bit of money. It's like. But
absolutely. I mean, I can give you an example that sales in 1982, for instance, represented only 170 million for 8 commercialized vaccines, and today we're in about 60 billion for about 20, 30 vaccines we have on the market. And for instance, Merck was able to make just in 1 year, in 2019, 3.7 billion in sales for Gardasil, so the HPV vaccine.
Yeah.
And Pfizer made 5.95 billion with Prevnar, which is a pneumococcal. And then, of course, COVID came along, and with Comirnaty, they were able to make sales revenues of $81 billion in 2021.
Yeah. And that's real serious money by any standard. So
absolutely.
I want to talk about the vaccines for COVID. Now, I have this theory here. First of all, and you're probably aware of this since you spent so much time studying this, the Cleveland Clinic came out a couple of years ago. This is about, I think last year, the year before, and they did a sample study of 50,000 of their patients. It's the second largest clinic next to the Mayo Clinic in America. And they came to the conclusion that people who had the booster shots, this is not the main COVID shots, the booster shots for COVID, were more likely to get COVID than the people that did, which means, ergo, the booster shots completely failed. They were useless, So my theory has been that maybe there was something to the original, there was some efficacy to the original COVID vaccines that people were issued. I mean, and here's my personal example. I went to my doctor. It's early 2021, and and I said, I had a appointment scheduled anyway, and I said, I want a COVID shot. She said, that's great, that's fine. And so they gave me I got the 2 Moderna shots 2 weeks apart, and then I had to come back. I have a heart condition, so I have to go regularly. I came back 3 months later, and she said, well, now you need a booster. And I said, well, Laura, I'm 69 years old. I've never had to have more than 2 shots for anything, vaccines for anything my entire life. Why don't we need a booster? And my doctor said to me, Shaz actually said to me, she said, Jim, we're wondering the same thing. And at that point, I thought, well, no. Well, yeah, I know. And at that point, I thought, well, no, I'm not going to do this. And I didn't. I didn't take the booster shots. But apparently, the booster shots were completely useless, according to the Cleveland Clinic. And the only reason I can think of the fact that there's been 8 booster shots since those original ones, the only reason I can think of is profit. Am I wrong there?
I would tend to agree with you, absolutely, because they weren't very well tested either, these booster shots.
No, they weren't.
They didn't really know they were efficacious or safe.
Yeah. They weren't basically weren't tested at all. And I understand, well, I don't know. That's a whole different discussion. I don't even want to get into that. I mean, my conclusion, I mean, I was a news editor while this was going on. And my conclusion was that right away, I mean, only with 6 weeks of data, it was obvious to me that COVID was a disease of the old and the sick, and basically didn't apply to anybody who was young and healthy. And so, the whole thing was vastly overblown. So, I mean, I can't. Well, let me ask you. I mean, you're the guest here. I'm doing too much talking. What do you think the original COVID vaccines were basically effective or not, based on what you know?
Personally, based on what I know, based on my research and understanding of the vaccine market and industry, I would say no. And that's also because I looked at the actual clinical studies that they only had 2 months worth of safety and efficacy data when we actually approved those vaccines in an emergency use. Of course, they weren't approved standardly,
Right.
but they weren't tested to know if we could stop transmission. Yet, when everyone was told that this was going to save us from the pandemic and get us out and back to normal life, so that's on the principle that it stops transmission, right? It didn't stop transmission. And again, when you look at how they decided what was considered safe and effective, especially the effective point, they were looking at, in the 2 groups, the placebo, and this would have been the first and only vaccine study that actually used a real placebo. They looked between the placebo group and the vaccinated group to see how many people got COVID. But they were testing the unvaccinated group more often than they were testing the vaccine group. So you can skew the results by the way that you test people. And remember, the testing was using a PCR test. And to this day, I haven't found any information to confirm what cycle threshold they were using, because we know that anything over 35 and even 27, some would argue, it's useless because you're only going to get false positives. So there are ways of skewing the study to get the results you want to. And by the time that they launched the vaccine campaign in December 2020, there was so much misinformation that was coming from the authorities about the actual COVID itself and lack of treatment. They were saying there was nothing you could use, no repurposed medicine, etc. I didn't believe a word of anything, and especially when it comes out in the New England Journal of Medicine, who, if you know, the editor-in-chief is Eric Rubin, who was also on the vaccine advisory committee. There were too many conflicts of interest. So I would personally say that we have no scientific proof that the first lot of vaccines that came out based on the Wuhan strain were effective against COVID.
That's fascinating. I'm glad you said that. I am. I assume you agree with me about the fact that there's documentation that the boosters weren't effective. I mean, that seems to be pretty cut and dried right now. But
absolutely, there was never any information that the boosters were effective. I mean, I was quite shocked to find out here in Switzerland, because I always tended to believe that Switzerland had very high standards, that they released the booster on the market with only animal studies. And the animal studies weren't that positive either. But they continued to this day to release the COVID vaccines with the different strains like it was a flu vaccine. So it's assuming that it's safe and effective, but it's never been properly established.
Well, even the flu, I mean, and this was when I was an editor, this was my standard or my comparison. Even the flu vaccine in the United States kills an average of 40,000 people a year. I mean, I'm sorry, no, the flu does,
Flu, yeah.
Right. Not the vaccine. The flu kills, right. And so, I mean, for the longest time, that was actually outpacing COVID. It wasn't until the very end of the pandemic that COVID actually overtook that. And I'm sitting there, I mean, well, do you think that the governments of the world just basically panicked? Do you think what happened? Is that what happened here?
I find that hard to believe again, because it's not like it's the first time we've had a pandemic or an epidemic, and there are pandemic plans in place. I can give you an example again of Switzerland. We've had a pandemic plan for influenza in place for at least a decade, and it was thrown out the window with COVID. and we saw behavior from the authorities preventing medical professionals from treating, that for me, it's not panic mode. There's something political going on behind the agenda, which we're not informed of. So I find it hard to believe that it was just panic. I mean, obviously, that's the justification most people would give. It's like, oh, we didn't know what we were doing, and it's always much better with hindsight to criticize, which is true, of course. But again, it's not like it's the first time we're having to deal with a pandemic or an epidemic.
No, and I agree with you about the fact that there is some political component to this for sure. Absolutely. It was also, I can't speak where you're at in the United States. It seemed like a blatant power grab from certain people in government as far as basically controlling the populace. You know, matter of fact, I've said that for the longest time. I think that maybe, and this is entirely speculation on my part, and forgive me, this is one of the things I do on the show. But I think that the Chinese actually deliberately released this onto the world just to see what would happen. It was basically an experiment to see the reaction. How much, if anything, people were going to panic, or how much, and in that sense, it was for them it was a success, and for us a blatant failure. That's the way I look at it. But hey, Shaz, let's talk about. I was reading some of the links that your publicist sent me about SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, and this has always kind of fascinated me. And well, I'm stepping ahead here, but still, at the basic, at the end of the day, and you said this too. It wasn't until the 1990s or 80s that this became really profitable. What? Why is there seems to be a cover up of of the SIDS thing about the fact that it might have been caused primarily by vaccines, and nobody wanted to acknowledge that. And now I'm stepping ahead here. I'm just thinking, forgive me. Why do doctors go along with this? If there's like scientific proof that this is happening, it does seem like the doctors are copacetic with the drug companies. And is that because they don't want to alienate them, or are they afraid of legal ramifications, or why is that?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned legal ramifications, because as far as I know, a doctor in the US who does not vaccinate is open to legal malpractice cases that get from his patients. But if he vaccinates, he's always protected, because he's protected under the policies that allow vaccines to be administered to the mass people, and obviously the vaccine compensation program in place.
But
He's protected.
I have to stop you. I have to stop you for a second. I have to stop you. But if a doctor administers vaccines, but the patient refuses, is the doctor still on the hook or not legally?
Legally, he shouldn't be if he got his patient to sign a waiver that he obviously doesn't want to get vaccinated.
Okay.
That's why they want you to sign a document when you don't want to get vaccinated, because that protects them.
Okay.
And I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for the doctors, because before COVID, I didn't know this. I'm now involved in a Swiss Association of Medical Professionals, and I've understood the pressure that they are under from insurance companies, from the state medical boards, and from the federal medical boards to basically play along with whatever the public health authorities are saying. And obviously, they're saying that you must vaccinate. Vaccines are, they save you from measles and mumps, rubella, and COVID, and HPV, cancer, hepatitis B. So they are put under a lot of pressure. If they don't comply, it's a lot more complicated for doctors. They may lose bonuses from their insurance companies. They might even be dropped by their insurance companies. They're open to being reported by their patients if they, for instance, say, hey, I don't think you should be getting a COVID vaccine because, hey, you're not at risk, or you might develop neurological symptoms. I mean, we had a case here in Switzerland of a doctor who signed 3 medical exemptions for his patients, and he had his license suspended because he was considered as going against the public health policy of protecting the public. So you can see that doctors have all kinds of pressure from all places. So it's very hard for them to step out of line and actually say, okay, maybe something I did harmed the patient. I mean, one of the few that I know of is obviously Dr. Paul Thomas, a pediatrician who started seeing kids in his practice who were developing autism, regressive autism, or who were having serious side effects after vaccines, and started questioning. It's always usually from direct observation and from a real desire to understand what's going on. Well, doctors may step out of line, but unfortunately, they really are stuck in a system that doesn't make it easy for them.
So you're basically, to summarize, you're saying there's enormous pressure for them to just go along, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially during a pandemic.
And also now I'm skipping another thing here. You brought up the autism thing. Now this has been going on in the United States for years now, where parents are saying they send their kids to school or whatever, then they get a shot and they come home and they're completely different permanently. Now I just read a thing that this is the first thing I've seen in the regular general news here in the US in ages about the fact that, well, somebody realized, and I didn't know this, Shaz, but when I was growing up, I'm almost 70. When I was growing up 50 years ago, 60 years ago in school, we got about 3 vaccines in the public school system, and now it's up to 11. Typically, young kids in the United States get 11 vaccinations in public school. And somebody said, well, maybe, supposedly, and you have to tell me, first of all, whether this is actually wrong. But supposedly, there's been a zillion studies that say no vaccines cause autism. But then somebody all of a sudden said, well, maybe it's a combination of some vaccines that do. And amazingly, to my utter amazement, it turns out nobody's ever tested for this. So where are we on that? Do you have any? What have you learned?
Well, unfortunately, when they say there are gazillions of studies that have proved definitively that vaccines do not cause autism, it's not quite correct. And I'd like to specify that I'm talking about regressive autism here.
Okay.
Because this is the easiest one to actually kind of observe and understand its potential link to vaccines, as opposed to autism, where the kid has never developed normally and never lost any words or eye contact or anything like that. But the Institute of Medicine, which is basically one of the highest academic institutions in the US, now called the National Academy of Medicine, actually did do several reviews. The first one of which was in 2004, specifically on autism. And they only looked at thimerosal-containing vaccines. So by that point, most of thimerosal-containing vaccines have been taken out of the childhood vaccination program, and the MMR, which obviously is the one that everyone talks about when they talk about autism, because of the famous Wakefield paper and his link to gastrointestinal symptoms and the MMR vaccine. And I'd just like to stipulate, he never actually said there was a link. He proposed there was a potential link that merited further investigation. And that on his own, and combined with the fact that he recommended the single vaccines as opposed to the 3-in-1, basically destroyed his career. So that was in 2004, and they concluded there was no link between thimerosal-containing vaccines, MMR, and autism. And in 2012, they came out with another study called Adverse Events of Vaccines, Evidence and Causality, where they looked at many, many different types of conditions, including autism. And for the DTaP vaccine, so the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccine, they basically came to the conclusion that it was inadequate to accept or reject causation. So a link between autism and DTaP vaccine, which ironically is the one that when, I don't know if you've heard of the Vax documentary, afterwards they went on a bus around the US and they were taking testimonials from different people. They were themselves surprised to find out that most testimonials from parents were linking autism to the DTaP vaccine and not MMR. So, and that is, of course, the individual vaccines. Nobody has ever looked at the complete vaccine schedule and to see what the impact of cumulative doses of vaccines can have on the neurological development of a child. And I come back to the fact that neurological injury has been seen, acknowledged. I wouldn't say understood, because the biological mechanisms behind it are still not quite elucidated, but that's been seen from vaccines for over a century.
Yeah, and you'd think that with so many people graduating from medical school and needing to write theses, that somebody would have looked into this by the 21st century, and apparently no. I just find that just unbelievable,
I think there are scientists who've looked into it, but they are very quickly dissuaded when they look at what happened to Wakefield, because this is a scientist, a very respectable scientist at the time, who just alluded to a potential connection through his 12 case studies, and he was absolutely obliterated. So this is a big warning sign to anybody who wants to look at that, autism and potential link to vaccines, saying basically, be careful, because you could be basically losing your license to practice, you could lose your livelihood, and doctors and scientists have bills to pay like everybody else. So it's a very big incentive to not get people to look at this question, and the government simply has not either. I mean, they say they have, but when you look at the studies that they provide, and ICANN, the Informed Consent Action Network, has done a lot of legal action, and it's fantastic. You can go look on their website. They have seen the studies that CDC provides them as proof that vaccines don't cause autism, but none of them look at the first 6 months of life and the cumulative exposure of vaccines given from day one, so including hepatitis B at birth up until 6 months old. So that's a big red flag, and that merits investigation and thorough scientific studies.
I was reading in one of the journals that you linked to that in Japan they changed the minimum age of vaccination from 6 months to 2 years, and when they did that, sudden infant death syndrome dropped to virtually zero. And you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. I mean, do you?
No. But again, most people aren't aware of this, and most people would debunk it because it's true. I think Japan now is reversed, and they do offer vaccines from 2 months of age. I don't know what their statistics now are if it did, but that's a big red flag. And
Yeah.
I would say another big red flag is when you see deaths after vaccines, what the strategy is afterwards. I mean, in 1978, which Dr. Pierre Corey talks about in his article as well, in 1978, 11 babies died after a Wyeth-produced DTaP vaccine. And instead, they called it a hot lot cluster. And instead of addressing the problem, they simply diluted the lots, so it was harder to pick up on hot lots, in the sense that one lot that comes out of the factory would be sent to many geographical areas, so it's harder to see clusters, which is it's horrendous when you think about it. Shouldn't a pharmaceutical company be concerned about, hey, our product is killing babies, maybe we should look at the formulation or look what happened with this lot, was there a contaminant? But no, their strategy was to dilute the lots, which is horrendous for me.
Well, Shaz, let's talk about, if you don't mind, from the American point of view, let's talk about the CDC here. Are they just in the pocket of the drug companies? I mean, are they doing anything worthwhile at all? Is this complete crap? What's going on?
Well, I don't live in the U.S., so I don't see maybe what CDC is doing well.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, and if I compare them to the public health authorities here in Switzerland, honestly, are they doing anything to improve the actual health of the population? I'm not sure. I really am not sure. Like, I would have to dig into that question specifically, but from what I can see as a patient and as observer and citizen of Switzerland, I don't see it here. And the CDC, from what I've heard from people in the US, they're not doing a great job. And from my understanding as well, they were actually losing a lot of funding before the 1980s. And AIDS came along and suddenly was a reason to continue funding. So again, there's lots of things that happened, diseases that came up. Were they real diseases, or were they just convenient political tools to get more funding, to stay in power? I don't know. This would be a question to ask maybe a scholar who's looked at CDC really from the beginning. But from what I've seen in the context of vaccines, unfortunately, I cannot say the CDC has done anything good, because all the money they've spent on vaccines, purchasing vaccines every year and giving them out to underprivileged children, because under the public program, they're free. They could have spent that money much better on educating on nutrition, lifestyle, make sure people have access to clean water. Even in the US, I remember I was shocked the first time I went to the US and I was told not to drink the tap water. And
Yeah.
that for me was like, hey, what? You can't drink the tap water? You're supposed to buy your water in plastic bottles? That makes no sense.
Right.
So
Well,
I think there's a lot of improvement that is needed.
well, you tell me, you're in Europe, and this seems to be a problem now of Western society. In some ways, we seem to be regressing. I'm just reading yesterday about the fact they're rationing electricity in the Netherlands. Even that's crazy. You know, when supposedly developed countries, I mean, and you're right, and we have trouble with water here in the United States, even though this technology to do this is ample and simple, and yet we still can't seem to get our crap together to do it. I do have to ask you regarding the CDC specifically, because this was we just talked about this on the show last night. This is about it was in the news yesterday. I mean, you have Mr. Anthony Fauci, who was he wasn't the head of the CDC. He was the head of the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, if I'm right. And there's a certain senator named Rand Paul who happens to be a medical doctor, which is, I think, seems to be the reason he's so onto this. He really wants to see Anthony Fauci in prison, and he has not been the least bit shy about saying it in public. He seems to think that Fauci completely screwed the American public. I mean, do you know about this? Have you followed the story? Do you have any thoughts on this at all?
Well, I have read Kennedy's fantastic book, The Real Anthony Fauci, and followed him from roughly the 1986, I believe, 1984, that he started as the director of the NIH or NIAID.
Yeah, right.
And the whole AIDS epidemic. So I totally believe that Anthony Fauci should be behind bars. But on the other hand, he's not alone. He was facilitated and enabled by someone or some people, don't know who. So he's kind of like just doing his role.
Yeah.
But yes, during COVID especially, he was very publicly, he was on shows. He was like,
I just assume
interviews.
I just assume he's filling his role because somebody's paying him to. That's the only possible thing I can think of.
Well, yeah, and then there's the whole issue of the biological weapons industry, which he was very much involved in as well, which again goes into detail. Kennedy goes into detail in the Real Anthony Fauci book, which I advise all your listeners really to read. I think it's an excellent book. But yeah, he was more paid than the U.S. president, from what I understood.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was the highest
$1,000 a year.
Right. He was the highest paid person in the entire U.S. government. That's right. Correct. Yeah.
And he should have retired 15 years ago, and he was still in power. I think he retired in 2022 or 2023. I can't remember exactly, but
yeah,
he was 80 when he retired.
No, I know.
That's
a constant theme on this show, Shaz, of the fact that these people seem to stick around forever. I mean, we have people in Congress who are in their 90s and still running for re-election. I mean, and Fauci was the head of the of NIDS, whatever that is. He was the head of it for 37 years. He didn't work there for 30. He was the head of it for 37 years. I mean, Christ, give it up. You know, it's like, no, we have this problem here. I don't know if you have this problem in Switzerland, but yeah, people in America, once they get into power, they just cling to it. They can't seem to, they don't want to go off onto the golf course. They don't want to. I don't know what the deal is, but you know.
Well, in Switzerland, we're supposed to have laws in place that keep people from having positions of power, but that only applies to like our federal council, which we don't have we do have a president, but it's always 1 year, and they're elected from the federal council, and they can stay in power for like 4-year segments,
right?
And then they get reelected. But when I was diving into my research, especially during COVID, I learned that there are people who are in our equivalent of the CDC, which is the OFSP, Office Fédéral de la Santé Publique. They have been empowered. They have been in very high positions for over 20 years, and especially when I looked at people who were working within vaccination, so vaccine policy, etc., and they often came from industry, and often were trained at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health as well. That would be a common theme.
It's very incestuous. Yeah. I don't have to tell you that. You know. Well, tell me about the World Health Organization. What's their problem?
Well, again, they've got, I think, the same problem as we have with the FDA and with Swissmedic, which is the equivalent of the FDA here in Switzerland. They've been captured by private interests. Like our FDA Swissmedic is financed 85% by the pharmaceutical industry, and the WHO is also largely financed by, they'll say Bill and Melinda Gates is in the pharmaceutical industry, but they represent all those interests, and even though it's a philanthropic organization, they seem to be getting richer, which doesn't make much sense to me, but. So they have a lot of private interests who are basically deciding where the money goes. And from an internal memo that came out in May 2024, just confidential, so I can tell you that inside it, these are people who work within the WHO who were basically calling out the favors that people were giving to other people's friends and not really hiring based on competency, but based on, you're like, hey, he's my friend and he'll say yes to whatever I want, etc. And all the conflicts of interest within the WHO, so of individuals who maybe, were also working for the pharmaceutical industry. So I think that's one of the major problems is the WHO's lost its independence. It's no longer an organization run by its member states. I mean, it says it is, but it's not, in my opinion. And when you look at the policies, the kinds of documents they're coming out with, it's all kind of favoring industry. And remember, the WHO is also responsible for the standards established within industry. So the biological standards of vaccines is determined by the WHO. So they get to determine what kind of formulation should be used, what kind of units should be used, and the pharmaceutical industry is very dependent on them for that. So it's kind of like a partnership now, as opposed to partnership with citizens, which is what it's supposed to be.
Well, Shaz, I'm going to ask for your opinion here. It's a little off topic, but not really. As the world gets more prosperous and more affluent, and the developed West figures out how to run capitalism even better, are we just doomed to this stuff? Is there any solution that you can see that where, like you said, the WHO is like basically in the pocket of the companies, not the people? Can we return power to the people? And is there any solution you see here that can be done? And let's just talk about even just this healthcare issue, nothing else. Is there anything you can see that how we can fix any of this?
Well, I guess all eyes are turned at the US at the moment with Kennedy and his position in HHS to see what he can do and how that might trickle down into other countries and even to organizations like the WHO, even if the US have retracted from the WHO. I always like to remind people that never underestimate the power of your voice and the power of your choices. We remain the consumers of their products, and I'm talking obviously the pharmaceutical industry. So it's also our choice to buy into or not to buy into certain products. That's one way we can exercise our power. If we can get our local politicians and people of power within institutions to fight for change and kick out the old people who are keeping change from happening, the
literal old people.
And of course, there are plenty of good old people who, have got very good values and you want to keep them. But the ones who are holding progress back or who are keeping these conflicts of interest in place, as I can see in Switzerland that we have, and I look at the people who are in charge of vaccinations, they all look like they're dying. And I'll be very honest with you, they look like they're 80, but they're 55.
Yeah, I bet they do. Bad food.
There's definitely reform that needs to be done, and I'm hoping that the younger generation, unfortunately, to a certain extent, like they don't really care. They're not really concerned by health issues yet necessarily. Except, after COVID, we got a lot of young people with health issues, and it's pretty bad. But I think as a consumer, we have to use our power of our money where we put it, power of our voice, not be afraid to talk to other people around us and to ask questions, because there was a lot of censorship and auto-censorship during COVID. People didn't want to dare share their opinions because they were afraid of being ostracized by their own family or their friends. So we have to break through that, dare to have these conversations, and dare to make choices with our wallet, which we've always known in the past. That's usually what makes a big change. If consumers start demanding, access to organic food or access to clean water, there can be change. But it's going to take a while, and it's going to take a lot of determination. It's going to take a lot of conversations, and we have to really just be brave, I think, as well.
Yeah. You were talking about, the people from COVID. There's the lingering effects of this, and do you see this as the more lingering effects are from the actual lockdowns rather than the vaccinations? I mean, is that the way you see this, or what's your take on this? How come COVID is having such a long lasting influence? Is it because people were shut in their house for 2 years? Is that the reason?
Well, I think that's definitely one of them, especially for the young people who were basically deprived of a social life and deprived of any kind of, optimism for the future. I mean, there was a huge influx of suicides in Switzerland in 2020. So it was before the vaccine came out.
Right.
And that was definitely from the policies. That wasn't from the virus. And now we're seeing a combination of those mental health effects and the physical health effects from the actual vaccination. So it's a bit of both. And it's going to last a long time. And it's going to take a while to get over this and to get past it, because a lot of people, as well as anybody with trauma, you kind of want to forget it ever happened. So it's hard to actually open certain conversations with certain people because it's just too traumatic. And we have to put policies into place and tools into place to allow younger people to be able to have a platform, to be able to share openly in a safe space. Also for middle-aged people, and it's not just young people, but even people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. A lot of them just like, COVID was a bad dream. It's not going to happen again, and we're past it. Especially in countries like Switzerland, where we're pretty comfortable. So it has to be a good reason for Swiss people to get out into the streets and demonstrate. But we're definitely going to see the impacts of both the policies and the vaccination.
Yeah, and but you've touched on something here that I've been kind of talking about for a while, and that is, relatively speaking, from a sheer medical standpoint, COVID was relatively benign. But what happens if we get something like, if there's a pandemic of something like Ebola, where 80 to 100% of the
Mhm.
people get it die? The problem now that I look at is that the government is completely blew up their credibility. So if the government actually says no, if you go out, you're going to die. I think people now won't believe them. That's what I think, which is I think is terrible.
That's quite possible, and I'd like to remind you that thankfully Ebola is not highly contagious. I mean, the
Yeah,
most fatal viruses usually are not so contagious. Like nature has some kind of auto control, it would seem.
I was
But
using
of
that as
course,
an
if
example.
they came
Yeah,
out,
hypothetical. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but it is a good example because obviously everyone in everyone's mind, Ebola is like a deadly, horrible disease. I mean, you bleed out your orifices, and we've seen enough movies to be very scared of Ebola as opposed to just a bad flu.
Yeah,
Which is what COVID basically is, obviously dangerous to people who are immunocompromised or obese people. We had young obese people who were affected by COVID, so there were sick people by no means. But and they have a vaccine against Ebola at the moment, or Marburg virus. So there is a vaccine available. I certainly wouldn't get it even if there was a pandemic, to be quite honest. But yeah, they will have to come out with something quite a bit scarier next time, I think.
yeah. So you were talking about the fact that basically, the people have to kind of take control of this. When you go to the doctor yourself now, are there certain this is a personal question, so forgive me if you don't want to answer it. Are there certain vaccines that you won't get after researching this? I mean, do you filter through? I do myself, but do you filter through the vaccine list or whatever from your own personal doctor? I'm going to do this, but I won't do this. Do you do this now?
Well, I'll be very honest with you. I haven't seen a doctor in over 10 years. The last vaccine I got was in 2005, and it was taken off the market a year later, which I obviously didn't know about until I started doing my research. So at the moment, I wouldn't get a single vaccine because the only one they would offer me anyway would be the flu vaccine every year, obviously COVID, a booster for my DTaP because I haven't had a tetanus shot in 10 years.
Uh huh.
Maybe hepatitis B. I've never had hepatitis B. I've had all the travel vaccines. I had hepatitis A, yellow fever, but I wouldn't get any of those anymore either. And I don't go to countries where they're obligatory. So that narrows some African countries out for me. But honestly, at the moment, I would not get a single one. But that's me personally based on my health status. I mean, I'm relatively healthy. I'm in my mid 40s. I don't see any risks. And I come from a family where we always, the minute you had a sniffle, you go and take a pill.
Yeah.
So when I started diving into vaccines, I also started into what are people doing to prevent or to treat these diseases we vaccinate against, like measles or pertussis. And I've tested this out myself, but aromatherapy, essential oils, vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, all these things have gotten me out of flus, have gotten me out of urine infections, have got me out of gout, actually, even. Sorry, I did go see the doctor once just because I needed to get a prescription for crutches. And I came out, and I kid you not, with 5 different prescription pills, like an anti-inflammatory, a proton pump inhibitor, an antibiotic, which made no sense to me, another painkiller, and something else I can't remember, which obviously I didn't take any of them. But there's a lot of tools in nature, in natural treatments, which I before wouldn't have necessarily believed, but having experimented on myself, I see how effective it is. And obviously it doesn't cost much. I mean, we have expensive health insurance here, but lucky thing in Switzerland is if you get a complimentary health insurance, it can also cover acupuncture, aromatherapy, naturopathy, homeopathy. So we have more options here in Switzerland, I guess, than maybe somewhere in the States.
Well, we obviously have acupuncture here, and I don't go anymore, but I used to, and I was astonished at how effective it was. And would you? This is completely off topic, Shaz. Who the hell figured that out? Was it, that you could put a needle?
Acupuncture?
Yeah, that you can put a needle in your foot and it can make you, and clear out your sinuses. I mean, you stop and think about this. I mean, talk about evolution. It's like, holy Christ. It's like, but no, it works. It seems to work. Every person I've ever said,
Yeah.
go try this. I mean, I've had people, said I'm having problems, blah, blah, blah. I said, at least go try this, because it works for a lot of people. And every single person I've ever recommended to comes back and says, holy crap, it does work. It's like it's so counterintuitive. It's ridiculous. But no,
Well,
you're
I
absolutely
think it's
yeah,
counterintuitive to us because we're kind of educated in this Western medicine, which has kind of killed off all this Eastern medicine. Chinese medicine is one of the oldest medicines, along with Indian Ayurvedic medicine, and they have basically a whole foundation for understanding how the human body works, which is completely different from the very reductionist, separatist method that we
yes,
have allopathic medicine has,
right,
where we look at everything as separate parts. They look at the body as a whole organism. And that's why acupuncture works. That's why their understanding of the energetic flow system in the body makes sense. And if that's not, I wish that was taught to doctors, because if they could use both types, they could use Western and Eastern medicine and use the best of both worlds, I think we'd have a much healthier population in general. But we tend to frown at stuff that we can't scientifically prove because, science for us is like, the almighty God who has all truth and has all the answers. When in actual fact, a lot of things that we still don't understand about the human body. We still, unfortunately, look at the human body in segments, and vaccinology, the science of vaccines, is no exception. They only look at the immune system. They don't look at the nervous system. They don't look at the digestive system. They don't look at the endocrine system. It's like everything works separately, which is not true. It's completely nonsense.
right, right. I've been very lucky because I had a heart surgery a few years ago, but for about 20 years now, I've had a very, very good personal doctor, and she is familiar with the palette of both, Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine and supplements, and she draws from. I can't speak more highly of her. It's like it's fantastic, but I'm lucky too. Most people don't have that, So, um, yeah, Shaz, I can't thank you enough for talking to
That's
us.
great.
I really
Well,
appreciate
thank you
it.
so much for having me, Jim.
Yeah, yeah. This has been great. I hope we can do this again, and maybe we can even do it with a video next time too, because I think people are going to be
Yes, absolutely.
kind of tired of looking at me. I'm not that good looking, Shaz. I'm
Yeah.
not.
I'm sorry. I was out on the road, so I couldn't do it by video. But thank you
No,
so much for accepting me to do this by a phone.
no problem. And I have a very nice picture of you on the screen here too. So well, at least everyone knows what you look like. So that's good. So yeah, I hope we talk again. I want to, and also I just want to thank you just as a concerned citizen for taking the time to study and write about this. Especially, I think it's actually good that you're not a doctor. I've had, like, last night I had a guy on Spencer Morrison. He writes about economics, and he's not a trained economist. I think it's good to be. You kind of have an overview of the situation that people are actually in the trenches never see. So I highly not to mention the fact that basically most of our experts are idiots anyway. So I want to thank you personally for taking the time to do this. I'm sure it wasn't easy. So
No, but thank you so much. It wasn't. But it was. I gotta say, it still was an interesting and enjoyable journey. I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. But
how
the fact, I guess I'm not conflicted, or I don't have any reputation to protect, so I
right,
have nothing to lose.
Hey,
right?
Shaz, how long did it
whole
take?
thing.
How long did you spend on this research for this book? How long did it take you?
10 years.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. See, it's amazing.
Yeah.
In terms of time, I assume you're never going to make your money back. So, thank you for doing it. I really, really, it's like people like you,
You're most welcome.
it's passion that drives stuff, so I don't know. I hope people appreciate that. Anyway, we'll talk to you soon. Okay. You take care.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Our thanks to Shaz Khan. I don't know about you. I thought this was pretty interesting. We didn't have her video, so you had to look at me the entire time. I'm sorry about that. But it was great talking to her. And it is pretty cool. Last night too, we had Spencer Morrison on. He's not a trained economist. He wrote a book on economics. People are doing this stuff. So, and we've had a lot of people on here. Well, Jeff Dornick was on Monday. He's the founder of pickaxe.com, the Twitter alternative, the X alternative, and he wrote a book on AI. And He knows a little bit about AI because he works with it, but I don't know if I'd say he's an actual expert. I don't know if that's but um, I think it kind of helps if you're not, really involved in this or haven't been in a law for a long time. I also found it interesting, and I can't remember where in the interview that happened. Excuse me. That Shaz also mentioned the fact that Anthony Fauci ran the Center for the National Institute for Infectious Diseases for 37 years, and that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah, and I want to point this out. He didn't work there for 37 years. He ran it. He was the director of that institute for 37 years. Oh, that's good. And okay, so you're saying, Jim, well, older people can have jobs. There's no reason. No, actually, that's not the problem. It wasn't his age per se. It's the amount of time he did it. Like, for example, Chuck Grassley is in Congress. He's a senator, right? For Iowa. He's 93 years old, if I'm right. Now he's sharp as hell. I don't know if you ever seen him on television or anything like that. No, his mind is not going away anytime soon. But the problem isn't his age. The problem is that he's been there for 45 years. That's the problem. I don't mind, older people can do stuff. And if you can do stuff, God bless, you should do it, but you don't have to do the same thing forever. I just I don't know, it really bothers me. Anyway, call up. The phone lines are open. 325 call Jim down here, right here. See, it's scrolling on the screen. 325-225-5546 or send us a text message at 408-458-5088. Love to talk to you. And in the meantime, for part two, I'm starting to call this now the Jimcast. This is the Jimcast. We talk about weird stuff in the news. I give my 2 bits, and I know you're just on your chairs waiting to hear what I'm going to say on the edge of your chairs, or in the river or something. Okay, so what I got to talk about now? I got to talk about. I'm obsessed with television ratings. You know that I'm obsessed with the media because I work in the media. I'm obsessed with it. I've always been obsessed with it. So I thought you'd want to know now. Nielsen, you probably know this. The Nielsen company has been keeping track of television ratings going back to the 1950s, if I'm right. But now, for the last 4 years, they've been measuring television viewing on all platforms. That includes YouTube, that includes streaming YouTube through your TV, all sorts of stuff. Like basically any way you can get video, they're keeping track of it. So they came to an interesting conclusion that in May, for the first time ever, regular broadcast television viewing fell below 20% of total TV viewing. You understand? Like that, if you're watching television, like over the air, with an antenna, and if I'm right, I don't think they're including cable television in that. I don't think they are. I think that's separate. But it fell below 20% for the first time ever. And also viewing YouTube on TV. Now this happened, we reported this previously. I think this happened in April, if I'm right, that for the first time ever, more people are watching YouTube on actual televisions than on their cell phone or tablet or desktop device, on computer devices. They're now watching on TV. Now, my wife does this because she's kind of obsessed with women's sports, and she's watching all sorts of sports stuff on YouTube, on television, and I know she's not the only one. So anyway, that happened. The thing about broadcast viewership falling below 20%, and everyone's predicting the fact that basically at some point in the future, no one's going to be watching broadcast TV. Yeah, it will die. It will. I hate to say it, but at some point it won't be financially economic to do it anymore. Excuse me. Because what I'm doing here is way, way cheaper than broadcasting a television signal through the air off of a tower. Way cheaper. And, you know, everyone knows that. So why would you, if you're not enough people watching, why would you do it? And you're not going, they're not going to. This is the same thing that's going to happen with radio. The thing keeping radio alive is in car listening, in your car. And the thing is, that's still a big deal. You would think that more people are streaming audio off their phone into their car speakers And people are doing that, but no, more people are still actually listening to the radio. And I think it's just because it's pretty damn simple. You push the stupid button and something comes on. I think that's the reason. Whereas even if you know how to do it, hooking your cell phone up to your car stereo can be a relatively difficult task. Now they started, and you can still get them, and a lot of cars, especially the Apple version, cars still come with them, either an Apple iOS interface in your car or an Android interface. I think that's called Android Auto. I think they call it, if I'm right. You can still get those things, and everyone thought that was going to be a big deal, and it turns out it isn't, because people would rather hook their phones up to the car, because you keep all your crap in your phone. So if you have your Pandora stations or your Spotify playlists or whatever you got, they're already in your phone. You just want to listen to through the car speakers, and so people are not that transfer never really happened, and those things aren't really used. I thought there was too. I thought people would gravitate toward that, but no, that's basically been a bust. So the other thing that came out, and my favorite columnist John Nolte at Breitbart.com, the other thing that came out is a list of top 20 streaming shows, and this is not on any one platform. This is streaming everywhere. Like, for example, the shows that are licensed in multiple outlets, like either Netflix or Amazon Prime or that sort of thing, and they're playing in more than one place. And Nielsen is keeping track of these particular shows, their cumulative viewership over all platforms. So what was number one, which is licensed to Netflix, but is not an actual American television program, and that's the animated show Bluey, which is out of Australia. That was the number one show streamed in the first quarter, no, first half of the year, excuse me, in the United States, believe it or not. And number two was Grey's Anatomy. Now, this is the amazing thing. Number 18 was reruns of Gunsmoke. Yeah, Gunsmoke from the 1960s. That was a number 18 streamed television show in America. Gunsmoke. And I like Gunsmoke. My uncle Donnie, bless his soul, he passed away a couple months ago. He was a huge Gunsmoke fan. I would go over to his house when we watch Gunsmoke together. I like Gunsmoke. But yeah, the fact that that's in the top 20 still. I mean, these episodes are 70 years old. Yeah, okay, fine. Let me pull up the list here. Hold on a second. I should have done this before we started. About what all the shows are. Okay, Grey's Anatomy was 2. NCIS was number 3. Family Guy was 4. Bob's Burgers was 5. SpongeBob SquarePants was 6. The Big Bang Theory 7. These are all reruns. These are all none of these show. And this is one of the things Nolte was trying to point out. He's as obsessed with the media as I am. And then there's only on the top 20, there's only like 4 shows that was actually designed for streaming. All the rest of them are old television shows. Okay, so number 7, Big Bang Theory. Number 8's The Rookie. The number 9 was Squid Game. That's the first show on the list that was actually designed for streaming. That was Netflix exclusive. Number 10, Law and Order SVU. And man, that Mariska Hargitay, she's been on that show for like 29 years. I mean, it's just like this stuff amazes me. And Grey's Anatomy? Now, from our Grey's Anatomy is still on television. They're still producing new episodes of it. I think it's been on television for like 26 years or something like that. I still remember when the wife and I got married, first got married, we would watch it for the first couple of years. We were really into it, and that's basically my history. I will get into television shows for a year or two, and then even if they're still running, I lose interest. The only exception I can think of is Mad Men, where I've seen every single episode. I love that. That's my favorite all-time drama. And then the other amazing thing too, call me up if you want to talk about this. The other amazing thing is that I really got into Downton Abbey, which surprised me because I'm normally not into like period costume dramas, but I came to the conclusion that their difference here, and the reason Downton Abbey was different than every costume drama on the BBC before and since, is because it actually referenced real historical events. It was not stuck in some nebulous time like the 1890s or something like that. I mean, it was specifically stuck in certain years, and they would reference what was going on in the history. And I think that's why it appealed to me. Other than the fact it was just kind of entertaining. All these shows are more or less entertaining. And so okay, so Reacher was number 11, and that's also a streaming only show. American Dad 12, Criminal Minds 13, The Night Agent, that's also a Netflix show, exclusive. Supernatural number 15, that's a Netflix show. White Lotus was on Max. That people seem to like that. I've never seen it. It's gotten huge buzz, even though if I'm right, every season is actually different. But that's working for them. Okay, Friends is 17. Of course it is, because it will never go away ever. Gunsmoke was 18. Young Sheldon is 19, and South Park is 20. South Park might be my all-time favorite TV show. Those guys are really good at making fun of everything, you know. But yeah, only four on that top 20, only four of those shows were actually designed for streaming. And Gunsmoke, a 70-year-old television show, is at number 18. Like, what the hell, you know? And so, along with this, also what happened yesterday is that the New York Times fired four of their culture critics. Uh, Specifically, it was classical music. I'm going off my memory here. Classical music, food. Hold on just a second. Okay, I'm gonna look. I should know this shit. I'm reading while I'm talking to you. Uh, all right, pop music. John Perales, who I do not know personally, but I is known of him. He's been doing that for 37 years. Uh, uh, Theater critic Jesse Green, television critic Margaret Lyons, and classical music critic Zach Wolf. They got the can at um, at the New York Times. And Nolte pointed this out, and he's absolutely right about this, about the fact that the New York Times is probably not going to go under. Now you can say, well, of course they're not. They're the newspaper record, but not really anymore. When it comes to actual political news, I mean, they're pretty much in the dumper. Well, the amazing thing is, and what was it? What is it? They had to actually apologize for something recently. Oh, about the fact that Zoran Mamdani, this guy running for uh, uh, mayor of New York City, he put on a college application that he was black, and he's not. And they reported that, and they got such blowback from their readers, they actually kind of had to issue an apology. They had to issue an apology for reporting a real factual event. In other words, they weren't wrong. It's just they so offended their far left readers, they had to apologize for running the story, which is like just the stupidest freaking thing ever. But they did. So, but that said, what Nolte's point is that, yeah, all right, they're completely shot when it comes to real news, but they have made a really good living now doing arts and culture stuff, which they always have, and that's the thing. I mean, it's always been, because it's New York City. It's always been kind of this paper of arts and popular and classical traditional culture too, and they're I mean, I'll be blunt. They appeal to white liberal women, and so because of that, that's working out really well for them. They are not going broke, and good for them. Now, why they decided to fire these four people, I have no idea. Although Perales, no, especially pop music. That's another thing. You can't do that for 37 years. There was a guy here in Minneapolis. What was his name? I can't remember now. He was the pop music critic for the Star Tribune for like 40 years. No, give it up, especially pop music. I'd say no, no, you don't know. Get a young person to do this. It's the same. The same thing with like the Rolling Stones going on tour. Am I going to go see that? Absolutely not. I do not want to see 80-year-old men starting around on stage playing 20-year-old music for 20-year-olds. I don't want to see that. I don't. And the amazing thing is, years ago, this is kind of lost to history, but in the 1960s, Mick Jagger actually gave an interview where he said, that once he turns 30, he might kill himself, or something to that that he said they had no business over the age of 30 doing this. I wouldn't say 30, maybe 40, but they don't. That's all there's to it. Now, Paul McCartney's on tour. That's kind of a different thing because I don't really consider him a rocker. I mean, he maybe does himself, and I know that in the Beatles, those guys argued about whether they were a pop band or a rock band. I mean, Lennon always thought that bringing McCartney on board turned them from a rock band into a pop band, and that may be true, but that's not their music, they weren't trying to necessarily appeal to 22-year-old kids. So they did, but that wasn't, they weren't really attempting to. Now, McCartney's 84 years old now. My sister told me she just got tickets to see this. I have no idea how much the tickets are. I'm guessing they're a couple $100 a piece minimum, is my guess. But I don't, I'd go maybe watch him. I'm not thrilled by it just because he's so goddamn old. I have no idea what kind of show he can put on, but no, Mick Jagger, no, I'm not going to see that. I don't want to see 84-year-old men acting like they're 30. I don't. It's bullshit. I mean, seriously, go see the uh, Red Hot. No, who am I thinking of? Green Day. I think Green Day sucks, but and now that I think about it, no, what's his name? He's not young anymore either. I think he's in his 40s or 50s. I don't know. Just Bob, it's music for young people, and that's fine. We'll let young people do it. John Perellis, who's been doing that job for 37 years at the New York Times, has no business doing it. I'm just going to say that right out. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's what I got there. Here's another, and this is a thing good for us to talk about here. Give me a call if you want, 325 call Jim. Shaz Khan came on. She's talking about vaccines, and this is kind of sort of a corollary to that. Guy gets on an airplane in New York City, I think at LaGuardia, and he asked to make an announcement through the PA system of the plane that he has extremely severe peanut allergies, and he would appreciate it if no one on the plane ate any peanuts during the trip. Now, okay, I understand his concern, but like a lot of people on the plane said, you're asking 250 people to potentially change their behavior to accommodate one single person. Is that fair? I'm not asking it rhetorically because I actually don't know. You tell me, is that fair? Some people say yes, some people say no. And then of course, what people brought up, and this is the part that I have a hard time arguing with. If that's your problem, don't fly. Take a train, drive. This guy went on and on about the fact that even peanut molecules in the air can set him off, and I do believe that. But there's another thing here too, and I talk about one of my old fart friends about this all the time. 50 years ago, when I was in high school, nobody had these allergies. Nobody. I mean, I don't. No one. Now they're everywhere. What the hell happened? It's like what Shaz Khan was talking about the fact, that basically the whole vaccination thing changed during the 80s and the 90s. And it seemed like kind of everything did. No one had any of these allergies. I mean, they were so rare when I was growing up. And now I don't know if I'd say they're commonplace, but enough people have them so that, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, uh, remedies are taken, you know? What do you say about that? I don't understand. It's the same thing, when we're talking about, and the thing is about the one fat kid we knew in school. So when I was in grade school, and the thing is, that you talk to people my age, boomers, stupid boomers that screwed up the world for you kids. And when I was in grade school, every class had one fat kid, and that kid was mercilessly made fun of. And I remember who the kid was in my class in my school, and he was mercilessly heckled. It was really, really terrible. I'm sure it was terrible for him. But the fact of the matter is that was rare. Kids were not fat when I was growing up. Now they're everywhere. Fat kids are everywhere. Like, what the hell happened? Is it diet? Is that no kids are getting any exercise? Is video games made everybody just stationary, prone stationary? What's I don't understand. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to these questions are. All I know is that that's the way it is, and it wasn't like that in the past. And now a guy is telling a whole plane load of people not to eat peanuts, and where years, 30 or 40 years ago, it would never even occurred to anybody to even not eat the peanuts. They were passing peanuts out. Now they don't. They don't pass peanuts out anymore because of the peanut allergies. I just I don't understand. I never did ask Shaz Khan about this too, because we were talking about the vaccinations, and this is she kind of alluded to this. I was going to ask her, but we kind of got off topic about the fact that she was talking about like that one of the things that made her write the book is the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. Now, my brother-in-law's brother was one of the very first people in America to die of AIDS. It was in 1981, 82, and it was so new they didn't know what it was. They didn't. But I'm not the only person who's brought this up. We've had civilization on this planet, human civilization, go back to the Sumerians for 15,000 years now, maybe a little more. We've had humans, Homo sapiens, for 100,000 years. So how come in the 1980s, in the modern era, all of a sudden this disease just appears out of nowhere? How does that happen? How come it didn't happen 15,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago? Almost all the diseases that we know of have been around forever. That's the thing. And, that's one of the things that Shaz was alluding to about the fact that we came up with vaccinations for all these diseases, and these diseases have been a permanent part of human culture. Smallpox has been eradicated. It's one of the first major diseases that no longer exists. It's in two test tubes. One's in Moscow and one's in New York City, if I'm right. And they are trying to decide whether they should destroy the test tubes. Those are the only two cultures of smallpox that exist anywhere on Earth anymore. That disease was the first major disease to be eradicated. So, but yeah, it's been around forever, and so all diseases have been around forever. Tetanus, any disease you can, except for COVID and AIDS. Well, we pretty much know where COVID came from. COVID came from a lab in Wuhan, China, and it's like I'll basically bet my money on this at this point. I mean, even Jon Stewart said anybody who doubted this was nuts. Because yeah, okay, we know it came from Wuhan, China, and there's a lab there that does this very thing, and they're telling us, nope, it was bats. Oh, screw you! It was not. It's like the governments of the world ask us to believe the most outrageous, contradictory stuff. No, it's the lab. It came from the stupid lab. Now, whether the one thing you can argue with me about, and I don't know this for certain, I speculate because that's what I do on the show. I speculate is that I said this to during the interview with Shaz that I think my personal speculation is that China deliberately released that virus to see what would happen. It was an experiment. It was a worldwide experiment to see how the world would react because it wasn't too dangerous. It did kill people, but not a lot of people. You know, it wasn't in relative terms. It wasn't that dangerous. The whole thing. I mean, it was about as dangerous as influenza, roughly. And people, oh no, it killed so many people. No, 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 it actually didn't. It did. Compared, yeah, compared to what? There's all sorts of stuff that kill people. So, you tell me compared to what it was dangerous, and it did. No, I'm just trying to. If you lost your relative here, I'm not trying to lighten the load here. I feel for you, and it did kill people. I know two people who were 32 years old in perfect health that died of COVID, and they actually did die from COVID. It wasn't, because the thing that was going on for the longest time there for 2 or 3 years, if you died and you had COVID, you were listed as a COVID death, which is stupid. But no, these two people, and they didn't know each other. They're two clients of my wife's, perfect health, 32 years old, and they died. Then COVID killed them. But but in some ways, I said this, they're kind of the exception that proves the rule. They were outliers. That's not how most people who died of COVID were old and sick. It's the same people that influenza kills. 40,000 people in the United States die of the flu every year. That's average. And in 2018, it hit a high of 80,000. And We were 2 or 3 years into the COVID pandemic before that many people died of COVID. Anyway, yeah. So where did okay, so we know where COVID came from. Well, where did AIDS come from? What is just and they said, well, somebody had sex with a monkey. Oh, come on. Really? Really? Okay, I can even buy that somebody had sex with a monkey, but that would cause this worldwide pandemic of disease, and then you look at the quote unquote cure for AIDS. Well, now you got to take 2 pills every day for the rest of your life, and it does work. That's the thing. It will eradicate your AIDS, but you got to keep taking the pills. You'll notice I'm not the only person who pointed this out that no diseases are ever actually cured anymore. We come up with treatments for them so that they can sell you pills for the rest of your life. And Shaz says, and a lot of other people do too, that that's what's going on with the COVID pandemic. Is it was literally just a big play to sell vaccine. As I said during the interview, we know for a fact that the booster shots did not work. That's been proven. The Cleveland Clinic proved that. Now I don't know about the original COVID vaccines. She said they don't work either. I certainly believe her. Up until now, I haven't seen any documented evidence, but I believe her. But I've seen the documented evidence for the booster shots. The booster shots did not work. They didn't. There were 8 of them, 8 rounds of them, and none of them worked. It was all bullshit. Well, how much money did they make off of those booster shots? Especially when you consider the fact that Joe Biden's standing up saying, "Get vaccinated." Jesus. What a jackass. That's all I'll say about that, you know. So who knows what's going on? But it does seem like a lot of people do stuff strictly for money. Have you noticed that? Which I think makes me at 69 years old kind of naive. I think that it took me a while to figure that out. I'm stupid. I am. And finally, okay, I got uh there's a guy in an English town on the coast who's running around at night in a cat suit, and he's baying and meowing and he's scaring the crap out of the populace. Even though there's a few people in town say they actually know who it is, but doesn't matter. He's running around town in his cat suit, and that's a good way to get shot, if you ask me. Now, I was trying to find this before we went on the air, and I didn't. Although I know this story is true because I've read it many times, and I think it was in Pennsylvania. And I think this happened about 5-6 years ago. Couples driving down a road in the woods in Pennsylvania, and they hit a Bigfoot. They hit a Bigfoot, and they think they killed it. So they get out of the car and they go, look, there's a Bigfoot in the road. They have run over a Bigfoot. Okay. And it's like, okay. And then they realize at some point it's not a Bigfoot. It's a guy in a Bigfoot suit. It's a human and he's wearing a Bigfoot suit. Okay. But this is nuts. Who runs around the forest in the middle of the night? They said it was pitch black in the middle of nowhere. They're in the middle of nowhere, pitch black, and there's a guy running around. Like, what is he trying to accomplish? Who's going to see him? And he gets hit by a car and he gets killed. I think this is the stupidest thing ever. And my friends who don't buy the Bigfoot, I got a very good friend of mine doesn't buy this Bigfoot stuff at all. Matter of fact, he thinks all the paranormal stuff we talk about on the show is crap. And I love, he's very entertaining when he talks about it. But, he's like, that's in his mind, that's his proof. Yeah, that guy, that Bigfoot, that's not a Bigfoot. That's a guy in a suit. You killed it. And they did. They killed him. They hit him with their car and they killed him. And that's like this made the press because the police had to come out and all of a sudden they are taking a Bigfoot suit off of a guy. So now this guy in this town in England on the coast, I think it's the English Channel Coast, and I can't remember the name of the town, Western or something like that. He's running around in a cat costume. So there's a quote here. This guy says he's out walking his dog. He says, "I don't know his name. I just think it's a wind-up," which I assume is, I think, kind of British or like crazy stuff. He's definitely not afraid of people. He does it just for fun. He just likes being a giant cat. Yeah, I bet he does. It's the stupidest thing. But yeah, that's a good way to get shot, if you ask me. You run around in a cat suit or a Bigfoot suit. Guy in the Bigfoot suit got killed by a car. Like in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, in the pitch dark. Like what is it? Who is he trying to impress? Who is he trying to convince? I don't know, folks. I don't know. Life is strange, man. Okay, what do we got tomorrow? We got tomorrow we got Keith Gross, former assistant state attorney general of the state of Florida, and his book is called Dirt Roads to Runways: Defending the American Dream for the Next Generation. He's on tomorrow night. He'll be live. So, and you guys didn't call me up again, and screw you. That's right. I had a good time. I hope you did. Want to thank Shaz Khan again for coming on again. Really fascinating. Yeah, we're really batting above our pay grade with the guests, folks. We really are. I want to thank Kimberly at AJ Rice's office for booking her too. Kimberly does great work, and we appreciate her help too. So, folks, we'll see you tomorrow night. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are, and good night to you, wherever you may be. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.